Good evening and welcome, everybody, including our canine friends here tonight. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight, whether that be in person or attending remotely. Your support is very, very much appreciated. I'm Marcia Sokolowski. I'm chair of the Canadian Friends of the Israel Guide Dog Center. It's always a mouthful for me somehow. And I'm so looking forward to what I'm sure will be a very fun, informed, and lively interchange on how to raise a Jewish dog. Ellis Weiner, writer of the book on this very topic, joins us tonight in conversation with writer Michael Wex. They promise to have us barking with laughter. Ellis and Michael, thank you so much for accepting our invitation to appear tonight. We are thrilled to have you here with us. I also want to thank our very generous sponsors, Congregation Habonim, Living Jewishly, Camp Canine, and United Bakery. We're very appreciative of your big hearts. And thank you, Ellie Rubenstein, spiritual leader of this wonderful synagogue, for your continued devotion and efforts to support us as former longtime chair of Canadian Friends and a current board member who's very devoted. Ellie asks that I give a shout out to the canines present here tonight as well. As a special for tonight only, and I repeat, only tonight, reduced fees for bark mitzvah lessons will be offered for those able to refrain from howling out of tune or out of turn during tonight's presentation. I'd now like to introduce and call upon our stellar executive director who works tirelessly and joyfully for our organization, Atara Derek.
Thanks, Marcia, and good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Atara Derek. I'm the Executive Director of the Canadian Friends of the Israel Guide Dog Center. And I've been a part of the amazing Israel Guide Dog family for almost a year now. And I can say it's been an absolute pleasure getting to know all of you in the room, all of the folks joining us online, and all of the many friends that were unable to join us this evening, but who remain very loyal supporters of our work. When I began this position, my friend, Rabbanit Rachel Turkinich, gave me a copy of How to Raise a Jewish Dog, and she said, "You may need this in your new position." And she was mostly right. The book is clever, and it's very funny, you'll see. And I was a new dog owner, and I loved its ideas. And then I began working with the Israel Guide Dog Center, and things got real very quickly. I began to understand that training our guide and support dogs in Israel was not just raising a Jewish dog. It was raising a hybrid canine superhero, Jewish. No simple task, and certainly one that has taken me a year to fully comprehend. For over 30 years, the center has dedicated itself to breeding, training, nurturing, and partnering guide and service dogs with Israelis who have vision loss, PTSD, and disabilities. It takes a year and a half to train one guide dog and get them ready to partner with a person with vision loss. And not all will make the cut, and every minute is dedicated to teaching these incredible animals to be the eyes of someone who cannot see. So for those of us whose biggest concern is that our dogs don't stay, watching the training of a guide dog is absolutely mind-blowing. You cannot imagine what they are capable of and what we're capable of teaching them until you see it firsthand. So it's with this in mind that I want to invite you all to join us in Israel. Visit us, see our puppies and our dogs, meet our trainers and our clients and our staff, and witness for yourself the immense undertaking that is training a guide dog. And keep us in your heart when you leave. Now, since I have you all in the room this evening, and including in your living room, I thought maybe I would transport us to Israel for a few minutes to meet broadcaster Lucy Ayub as she visits the Israel Guide Dog Center for the first time. So we're going to watch a video. Go ahead.
Welcome to the Israel Guide Dog Center in Bet Oved. This beautiful place revolutionizes people's lives. And today, we're going to see how this magic happens. Hello.
Hello, nice to meet you. I'm Noach. Welcome to the Israel Guide Dog Center for the Blind.
So where do you suggest we begin?
Well, if it's up to me, always start with the puppies. They are the best.
So tell me about this place.
So this is our puppy house. This is where the puppies are born. For the first 5 weeks, they're with their mother, they nurse, and the next couple of weeks is time for them to be enriched. We do different surfaces for them to step on. We have noises, we have different kind of toys. And then at the age of 7 weeks, they start their second stage of life, which is outside of here, with volunteers, which are puppy walkers. At the age of 1 year, when they're finished with their puppy walkers, they come in here for training.
Hi, Lucy.
Hey, La. Introduce us, please.
This is Joyce. Joyce, this is Lucy. Joyce is with me for the past 3 months and she's been training to be a guide dog.
What does it mean to train a guide dog?
The dog needs to protect the person from the obstacles around him and to bring him from curb to curb. It takes about 5 months to train a dog, but also afterwards the dog is working and continues training with the person. We have an obstacle course right behind us and I would love you to experience it if you'd like.
Okay. קדימה.
יצרה, עשי צעד אחד לפנים, תבדקי למה. טוב מאוד.
כל הכבוד, ג'ויס.
יצרה, נראה למה יצרה. טוב
תודה רבה.
המון.
Wow.
How was the experience?
It was amazing, actually. I mean, I felt confident.
I completely saw it, and the fact that you were confident and calm, you gave Joyce the opportunity to do the job, so you were a good team.
Since it was founded in 1991, the Israel Guide Dog Center has partnered hundreds of guide dogs with people with blindness and visual impairments. In recent years, it has also offered service dogs for people with PTSD and for children with special needs. Some will attend a 4-week course, others will have shorter trainings or home course. At the end of their training, they receive a dog to accompany them onwards in their lives. It is a center of knowledge offering training at the highest professional standards. All of this happens here.
I served for 5 years in the Nahal Brigade. I have PTSD. She is responsible for at least 50% of me smiling. She guards me at night, so it puts my mind at ease. She knows how to calm me down when I'm really crying. So this is the first big impact, which only this changed my life.
I was a cane user before. I just wanted to be able to be a little more independent. I trained with Honey and it's been heaven since.
The guide dog gave me the opportunity to be independent, like everybody.
Well, I hope I've sparked your curiosity, and I hope you'll come visit us the next time that you're in Israel. And if you visit during Purim, you'll see that the dogs actually finally get to wear capes. Which brings me to our event this evening, raising a Jewish dog. What does that even mean? Does it mean that Jewish dogs like challah and chicken soup? Does it mean that they know to run when you pull out the shofar? Thankfully, you have not asked me this question. You have asked the experts. And I'm so delighted to have Ellis Weiner and Michael Wex here this evening. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the two of them before we begin. Ellis Weiner began as an editor with National Lampoon. He moved on to freelancing for 1,000 magazines back when 1,000 magazines existed. and was one of the original columnists of the much-lamented Spy magazine. In 1980, he began contributing to The New Yorker. For a dozen years, he wrote scripts for children's television, including Ramona, The Puzzle Place, Reading Rainbow, Shining Time Station, Bear in the Big Blue House, and other shows for viewers 3 to 6. I remember a bunch of those. He is, with his late wife, Barbara Davelman, co-author of the best-selling Yiddish with Dick and Jane, which, by the way, is for sale out in front if you would like to pick up a copy. It's not as good-selling sequel, Yiddish with George and Laura, in addition to How to Raise a Jewish Dog and How to Profit from the Coming Rapture, as well as Affirmations, Meditations for Your Dog, and Catechisms, Fundamentals of Feline Faith, and the Big Jewish Book for Jews. Solo, he is the author of many books, including The Joy of Worry, Drop Dead, My Lovely, and The Big Boat to Bye-Bye, as well as National Lampoon's Dune, which is a parody of Dune, the novelization, much loved by geeks, of the movie Howard the Duck, Letters from Sicily, or Cecily, based on the TV series Northern Exposure, and Santa Lives, 5 conclusive agreements for the existence of Santa Claus. And while Ellis is very funny on his own, we had to invite Michael. Michael Wex is the author of 3 books on Yiddish, including the New York Times bestseller Born to Kvetch, which is also out front. Michael made his theatrical debut hanging from a cross in a medieval English mystery play. A native Yiddish speaker whose songs have been recorded by such bands as the Grammy-winning Klezmatics, he has also translated the 3-penny opera from German into Yiddish. His one-person shows include Sex in Yiddish, Wie Gott in Paris, and Good Yontif Yoko. I Just Want to Jewify, the Yiddish Revenge on Wagner, was recently revived on Zoom by the Ashkenaz Festival. His most recent major project, I'm going to really mess this up, and I'm really sorry, Beim Kaberet Yiddish, an all-star recreation of the 1938 Warsaw Yiddish cabaret written and directed by Wex, was the surprise hit of Ashkenaz 2022 in Toronto. Bas Sheve, the long-lost Yiddish opera restored by Wex and composer Joshua Horowitz, was the not-so-surprising hit of the same festival. So you will have the opportunity to ask Michael and Ellis questions after their discussion this evening during the Q&A. And I'm so pleased to welcome them to the stage. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Don't worry, Ellis will be joining us, but I thought for his comfort as well as everybody else's, so that we can really understand the magnitude of Ellis's achievement with How to Raise a Jewish Dog, I thought I would speak off the top for just a few minutes about dogs and Jews in general. Because when I found out there was such a thing as the Israel Jewish Guide Dog Center, I realized, yes, but what if we took out the guide? Would there be an Israel Dog Center? Because it's well known that Jews, Jewish people, and dogs have a long and contentious relationship, a lot of which goes back to the fact that in the old country, dogs had a bad reputation for chasing Jews, assaulting Jews, biting Jews, etc. And the more traditionally dressed a Jewish person was, the more likely they were to be attacked by a dog. This was generally taken as a sign of anti-Semitism, not on the part of the dogs so much as their owners. But it's possible there was more to it. And this is where Ellis's work begins to come into things. Why we're here tonight, because How to Raise a Jewish Dog is the first book, at least the first one that I know of, to take this alternate view of Jews and dogs seriously. It's the first book ever written. And remember, it does come from a theological seminary in Boca Raton, or is it Boca Raton? I've never been there, in Florida. I honestly don't know how you pronounce it, but they don't need to tell you this because they know. But you might not know that this book is based on a Talmudic statement, a Talmudic ruling. It's in Gemara Shabbos, if you really don't believe me, where it forbids any Jewish person from spaying or neutering any animal, not just dogs, but anything, right? So you go up the street, you go to Toronto Kosher, and you buy a capon. Well, the capon might have been killed by a Jewish shoichet, but the rooster that capon started out as has to be fixed by somebody who isn't Jewish. Now, you can imagine this gets really difficult because you can't just have somebody who works at the butcher shop and say, fix that rooster for me. You're not allowed to tell somebody to do something that would be forbidden to you. So I'm trying to imagine the job description here. Since you can't tell anybody, self-starred or sought, you need somebody who's self-motivated. And Ellis and his collaborators, these were the first people, the first authorities on dog training to take this seriously and to acknowledge in public that just as information wants to be free, dogs want to be Jewish. They weren't biting the Jews, they were trying to attach themselves to the Jews so they could go home and not get neutered and not get spayed, and so that they too could get a little nachas from kinder, a little joy from their children, just like the Jewish people and everybody else in those countries was doing. Because, for centuries, if you had a dog, chances are it was a guard dog rather than a companion or a pet. And a certain viciousness was tolerated, if not actively encouraged, even amongst Jews who owned dogs themselves. So the other side of the coin from not spaying the dog, this comes to the fore in the Jerusalem Talmud. In case you're not aware, we have two Talmuds because some of us didn't have big enough headaches. So you have the Babylonian Talmud and you have the Jerusalem Talmud. What I was talking about before is in the Babylonian. The Jerusalem Talmud, though, has a story. I'm not making any of this up, by the way. Is somebody once invited a rabbi to his house for dinner, and he had the dog sit next to the rabbi. The rabbi, understandably, takes umbrage at this. He said, what did I ever do to you that you should insult me like this by having the dog sit beside me? The man said, but Rabbi, I'm not insulting you. I'm giving the dog a reward. I'm letting the dog sit with you. I am repaying it for its good deed. What was the good deed? He said, kidnappers came to our town. One of them wanted to take my wife, but the dog, and I will quote this in Hebrew in case you don't believe me, the dog achala et habetzim, right? The dog ate his testicles. It's in the Talmud. I'm not making it up. Just because a Jew can't neuter a dog, this doesn't mean that the dog can't neuter a Jew. No, you go to New York City, there's a statue in Central Park of a dog called Balto. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Balto. Balto was a sled dog who went 674 miles in an Alaskan blizzard in order to deliver medicine to children stricken with diphtheria. Now, I think that at least outside of the Beis Din here, where the divorces are granted on Viewmount, there should be a statue commemorating the Talmud dog, the dog that can jump up and bite off the beitzah, right? Now, God might make the dogs, but it's up to us to make the dogs Jewish. And what does being Jewish really consist of? What do you do when you're Jewish? You don't do this, and you don't eat that. It's a great deal of prohibitions. The prohibitions eventually provoke a feeling of disgust for whatever it is that's being forbidden. And that's what dogs have to learn. That's what How to Raise a Jewish Dog fundamentally is about, teaching a dog, right? So, for instance, God doesn't make dogs follow the rules for kashrus. There's no legal basis to forbid a dog from eating food that's not kosher, right? What we need to do, we need to teach the dog discernment, The dog needs to know good from bad. And the first command that we need to teach our dogs as Jewish dogs, they might spend most of their lives with their noses up the rear parts of the dog that's closest to them, but that doesn't matter because the first thing we need to teach them is feh, right? Once the dog learns feh, you know you've got a Jewish dog. Dogs lack an innate sense of disgust. Feh is not going to be found in the best-known dog training book ever written, I think, certainly in our time, is called How to Be Your Dog's Best Friend, which is, in fact, mentioned in Ellis's book. How to Be Your Dog's Best Friend was written by Christian monks in an Orthodox monastery. At least it's an Orthodox monastery, the Orthodox monastery of New Skeet in upstate New York. Well, my parents are from Poland. I don't want a dog that is full of Christian virtues. I want a dog that acts like I do. I want a dog that understands my way of life. And it's a cliche that dogs come to resemble their owners. Nobody had ever thought of it in anything other than physical terms until this book was published. How to Raise a Jewish Dog deals with the inner dog and teaches us how to unite das Pintele Hintel, that inextinguishable spark of canine authenticity, with das Pintele Yid, the inextinguishable node of Jewish authenticity. So Sholem Aleichem, the famous Yiddish writer, wrote a story called Rabchik, a Jewish dog, and he defines exactly the kind of dog that this book will help you produce. And Sholem Aleichem says, I'm quoting, "You're walking down the street one day and a stray dog starts to follow you. What kind of a pest is this, you think? You raise your hand at the dog, scat, get out of here. The dog stops, it ducks as if it's dodging a blow and continues to run after you. You stop, you look at the dog stops, it looks at you. You spit, you keep going, the dog keeps following. You're losing your temper. You grab a stick, you let fly at the dog, but the dog's got a better idea. He lies down on the ground with his paws in the air. He looks you straight in the face as if to say, no, you want to hit? Go ahead and hit. Right? That is what a Jewish dog is. Go ahead and hit. And the noise it's making while it's sitting there, lying there with the paws up in the air, the noise that's coming out of it means I hope you and your stick will be very happy together. So, no, Ellis, who's sitting right there, please come on up now. Please welcome Ellis Weiner. I noticed in reading the book, and when you read it, you will notice too, that it is basically a Haggadah. It's set up in the same form as the Haggadah that you read at a Passover Seder. And it's organized on traditional principles, the principles of the Vier Kashas, the 4 questions that, of course, get asked at the beginning of the Seder, and that the rest of the Seder is supposed to spend its time answering. So I'm going to start by asking Ellis the first question that he poses.
Please.
In the book, Manishtana, why is a Jewish dog different from all other dogs? Can everybody hear okay? Or should I? Yeah.
Good evening, and thank you for the invitation. And to dispatch Michael's first question, I'll read a little bit from the text. A Jewish dog has 3 important traits that an ordinary dog doesn't have: an exaggerated sense of his own wonderfulness, an exaggerated sense of his own shortcomings, and an extremely close relationship with his master. I want to amplify a few things that Michael said. The basis of this, it is supposedly by the rabbis of the Boca Raton, which means rat's mouth in Spanish, Theological Seminary, because I should announce that I wrote this with my wife, Barbara Davelman, who passed away earlier this year, so I'm glad to have an opportunity to see her in these pages and to talk about her, because half of this book is absolutely her. we heard about the monks of New Skeet. They, as Michael said, they're a monastery in upstate New York, and this is all true. They raise and train German shepherds. They publish dog training books. They take in clients. They'll train your dog if you go to them. And they've done videos. So we looked at that, and we thought, well, if monks can teach people how to raise dogs, we have to do the Jewish version of that. So instead of a monastery, obviously, we created the fictional Rabbis of the Boca Raton Theological Seminary, where I like to say which is located in Boca on 2 floors of a condo building. There are pictures of me as Rabbi Allen and Barbara as Rabbi Monica, and all of our dogs as they then were. But what Michael hasn't said is that our premise for raising a Jewish dog, we decided the only credible way we could enact this, the only credible technique we could bring to bear was to teach you to raise your dog the way we were raised as Jewish children in the 1950s and 60s, which is to say, we teach you in the book how to use sarcasm, codependency, passive aggressiveness, and it's laid out here, quite specifically, chapter by chapter. Now, the book does start with the 4 questions. So when we say the Jewish dog has an exaggerated sense both of its own wonderfulness and its own worthlessness, we know what we're talking about because we were raised by similar mothers. So there's your first answer. There are other questions. For example, all other dogs are praised when they are good. Why does a Jewish dog possess an exaggerated sense of his own wonderfulness? A Jewish dog is not only praised when he is good, but he is praised to other people. Look at what a good dog. Did you ever see such a good dog? This causes the dog to believe that he is good not only in his master's eyes, but in the eyes of the entire world. He thinks that everybody thinks that he is good. A Jewish dog is also allowed to do things other dogs are not, such as eat table scraps, jump up on the good sofa, and sleep in his master's bed. These techniques, public praise and unconditional love and pampering, combine to bestow upon the dog a self-image of being excessively wonderful, which leads to the dog being happy. But it doesn't stop there.
No, but do Jewish dogs have not seemed to develop the same problems in later life that people raised according to these principles that you just outlined, you are the most wonderful thing in the world, except for right now when you are the lowest thing in this world.
Right, and look what you're doing to me.
And look what you've done to me.
Right.
Look, I was a happy person and you came along. This has produced 2 generations of total neurotics.
Exactly. If not...
On 2 legs, but what is the effect on the dog?
You say neurotic, but let me expand that. As you'll see in the book, the owner of the Jewish dog gives a series of contradictory commands to the dog. Now, Michael and I were talking about this because we're of a certain age, and we remember R.D. Lang and the Tavistock Institute back in the late 1960s. Lang had a theory about schizophrenia. He adopted Gregory Bateson's idea of the double bind. The double bind is when you're both told that you must do something and you cannot do that thing. And at the time, this was thought to generate schizophrenics. So, in a way, the way to raise a Jewish dog is to raise a schizophrenic dog by telling it how wonderful it is, but also how terrible it is. And the third principle is that the Jewish dog will never fully understand or appreciate how much he or she is loved by the owner. And the owner's essential message to the dog is, when you die, I'll have to be buried with you. So it's beyond neurotic.
Beyond, but you still, you get things, sorry, I knew what I was going to say a second ago, and it just vanished.
Welcome to my world.
Yeah. But in doing this, you can see how we're replicating with the dogs situations that are common in Jewish life.
Exactly.
So you look in the Bible, there's a thing in the Bible that says, and you shall call the Sabbath a delight. How has this been interpreted by the rabbis is you should eat 2 hot meals on the Sabbath. That's great, but you're not allowed to cook on Shabbos, but you have to have the hot meal anyway. This accounts for the invention of cholent, and which accounts for the invention of dog food. I mean, it's all, there's a continuum here from that, and yet you have all kinds of Jewish people. Jews invented psychoanalysis, as we all know, but only for us. Why are the dogs able to withstand this?
First of all, because they're dogs and they're not people. I've got you there.
I missed that one.
And eventually, what we teach in the book is that you give dogs this order or that, you command it to do this and not that. But finally, if it disobeys, you give up. The dog wins. So you say sit, and the dog doesn't sit. So we teach you different tones of voice and different approaches to say, would it kill you to sit? Or what, you're still standing? But finally, the final stage of this procedure is you say, all right, fine, I'll sit. And you sit, and that's it. And the dog wins. The dog doesn't become schizophrenic or neurotic, but you do, because you already are.
Okay, and what happens if you say to the dog, one of these days, I won't be here anymore? There's not going to be anybody to put the gravy train into your...
Not only is the question, not only is there that, but one of the techniques we teach is to leave the room, to give up. You beg, you plead, you order, you're stern, the dog doesn't listen, you say fine, and you leave. There's a chart of when and how to apply that.
Now, is there breed-specific training? It's got to be. A German Shepherd is going to have different interests than a Dachshund or a Chihuahua.
Well, no, we haven't broken it down in that way, but we have, let's see if I can find the chart. We have a chart of the kinds of hybrid dogs that have been invented and created specifically to be raised Jewish. Let me see if I can find it here. No.
While Ellis is looking, I'll ask a question about the first Jewish dog that I know of, and probably looking at the audience, I'd say he's probably your first Jewish dog too, from the Nestlé's Quick commercials.
Oh yeah, Farfel.
When we were all very young, Jimmy Nelson's dog. Jimmy Nelson himself was not Jewish, and yet the dog was named Farfel. Right, so this clearly is the dog's name. Jimmy Nelson didn't give it the name because Jimmy Nelson did not speak Yiddish. Farfel.
I don't know
what
the
is
name
he?
comes. Farfel is chopped up matzah.
And you can call a person who is undergrown.
Oh.
Farfel. Like little. Okay. There was a famous gangster, a Murder Incorporated gangster.
Really?
Little Farfel Kovalik.
Well, you learn something new every day.
But you look at what happens to Farfel. Farfel, who's obviously made out of cloth, he has to open his mouth, but he never gets the quick. He's the one that says chocolate.
Right, and
but
that's it.
Does he get the chocolate?
Well, we hope not, because as we know, chocolate is toxic for dogs. But I have a story about that. I used to have a fox terrier, and we came home one night, and she had eaten a pound of chocolate candy. It was a Sunday night. I called the vet, and he met me at the vet office on a Sunday night, which was very impressive to me. And he saw, and I described what happened. He said, "Don't worry about it. Chocolate candy is mainly not chocolate. It's sugar, it's eggs, it's other things, it's vanilla. The only thing that's really toxic for dogs is baker's chocolate. The solid blocks. That's poison. But chocolate candy," he said, "she'll bounce off the walls a few hours. Just let her go to sleep, and she'll be fine." So that's a relief. I'm I do have this, and I think we invented this, so you've never heard this before. Everyone knows that there are pure breeds, and there are crossbreeds like a Labrador Retriever and a Standard Poodle equals a Labradoodle. A Maltese and a Pomeranian is a Maltipom or a Pomini. We suggest some specifically engineered crossbreeding to be specifically raised Jewish. For example, the St. Bernard and the Alaskan Malamute will give you a Bernard Malamute. And the advantage for being raised Jewish is that it's a very literate dog. The soft-coated Wheaton Terrier, the Silky Terrier, the Kerry Blue Terrier, and the Welsh Corgi, also called the Cardigan, gives you a soft and silky blue cardigan. The Leonberger, the Golden Retriever, the Berger des Pyrenees, the Pekingese, the Nova Scotia Duck Tolling Dog, and the Spinone Italiano gives you Leon Goldberg's Peking Duck Italiano. The Havanese, the Welsh Corgi, and the Labrador Retriever gives you the Hava Nagila. The giant Schnauzer, the Pointer, the Japanese Chin, and the Black Russian Terrier gives you the giant pointy-chinned Russian, which reminds many families of Eastern European ancestors. Siberian Husky, Black and Tan Coonhound, and Chinese Crested Boxer gives you the Husky Black and Tan Crested Boxer. Comfortable to have around, doesn't hurt circumcised men in the groin. The Gordon Setter, the Kerry Blue Terrier, the Cavalier King Charles Spaniel, the Canaan Dog, the American Water Spaniel, and Pointers gives you Gordon and Kerry King's Canaan Water Pointers, and so on. So once you've made up your mind to raise a Jewish dog, thanks to, CRISPR technology and genetic technology, there's no limit to the kinds of creative dogs you can come up with. The essence of raising a Jewish dog may have something to do with what Michael said about, yes, they like, or actually what Atara said, they like chicken soup, but they like everything, mostly. But it has to do with the bond, the special bond between the dog and the master, and to the point where they become one organism, and it's never clear where one ends and one begins. Does that ring a bell with you? Do you have a dog?
I had dogs. They've gone to a better place now. But I don't know. I mean, Mrs. Nussbaum, which was the name of one of the dogs, Mrs. Nussbaum and I, we did not see eye to eye on anything. And I would stand on the porch, and the dog, it's time for the dog to come in. I'm going, Mrs. Nussbaum. And people are coming from down the street. Two women showed up, both claiming to be Mrs. Nussbaum, wondering where Pierre was. But there was never this level of communication. I may have raised her wrong.
Did you offer her unconditional love?
I tried.
Because
she turned me down.
But because we have a cycle in which you start with unconditional love, but then you're very disappointed in the dog, and you chastise the dog, and so you offer it conditional, unconditional love. That might have been more up your alley.
So my mistake must have been just lavishing it with approval. All the time.
And so she didn't respect you.
All the time. Yeah, she just walked all over me.
Boy, does that sound familiar.
It's like, you're too nice. You're a nice guy, but who wants to go out with a nice guy, Mrs. Nussbaum was looking for excitement. Mrs. Nussbaum
was looking for an alpha.
Exactly. She was looking for an alpha, and she got an olive base. This was her problem.
Had you consulted the book, you might have been able to learn more interesting socializing instructions to give the dog. We have a little chart here. For example, when the dog chews up the sofa, this is about your dog meeting other dogs and falling under their bad influence, because it's never your dog's fault. You go to the dog park or you're just walking down the street and the dog meets other dogs, and they're hoodlums, some other dogs. They're not nice. So, for example, if the dog chews up the sofa, you blame it on the neighborhood mutt and you say to your dog, "Who'd you learn that from? Your new friend Sparky?" If your dog snarls at another dog, the other dog, the reason for that is that the other dog has not been raised Jewish, so the way you remonstrate with your dog is, "Oh, now we're bullying everybody, acting just like those other dogs?" I might point out here that a special technique for raising a Jewish dog is to, as much as possible, talk to it in rhetorical questions. If the dog barks all day at nothing, and you've seen, the small, I know we have a small dog here, but I'm not saying it's neurotic, but many small dogs are yappy and neurotic. You say to it, "And where did you learn to bark like that? Because I'll tell you something, you didn't learn it in this house." Say the dog steals food from the kitchen table or the counter. We call that in the business, which I learned from my wife, counter surfing. They learn that from beagles, from ridgebacks, which my wife used to rescue, fox terriers, other food-stealing dogs, as we call them. You say, "Oh, so this is what they teach you, your so-called friends." And if the dog lies around all day, gets up to pee on the floor, and then resumes lying around, they learn this from spoiled lap dogs, toy dogs, Maltese, Papillon. And you say, "I suppose this is what your fancy rich friends do." Well, guess what? We don't live like that here. Sooner or later, the dog will get the message.
Okay, and what about, though, going, I don't know if it's a step beyond that or if it's a step beneath that, but you invent another dog, the invisible dog that you then, without any real conviction, accuse of having done whatever it is your dog just did. So it's like, must be the other dog that lives here
bad Sparky
that made wee-wee on the kitchen floor. Oh, yeah, it's the other little puppy who I have. This, with a child, it's frightening enough because you start to think there's probably some other kid here who's having all the fun, but will the dog realize, or will this drive the dog to...
Well, this will drive the dog insane because it'll spend its time looking for this invisible, non-existent dog.
Well,
right. I'm going to move this.
Now, I've heard of people who actually, buy aerosol cans of scent.
Really?
To try and convince their dogs that they're... But I think this is pushing it. This is cruel.
I thought you were going to say the opposite. I thought you were going to say, "Why can't you be like King over here? No, he doesn't do that."
Oh, you could do that too. But that's usually the dog you had that you no longer have. So it's, the dog I had before you. No,
right.
That
was
a
dog.
dog. I don't know what you are. You call yourself a dog, you. To a dog, you're not even a dog. It's, so you have to have like the vanished saint dog.
Exactly.
And that's quite important. But now, the things you would do with your children.
Did I raise them like dogs? Yes, I did.
Yeah. So the dog gets, "You're killing me. You're putting me into an early grave."
Right. After all I've done for you, this is the thanks I get.
Yes.
That's what I would say to a child. To a dog, I would say, "After all I've done for you, this is the thanks I get." I think that's more the tone that they recognize.
Yeah, well, you've got to go loud with the dog. They can hear things that the rest of us can't.
That's true.
And that's, the klezmer dog whistle that only a dog can hear, that kind of thing. And again, is there anything within Jewish dog training that works the same way as a dog whistle? Something only you and the dog are aware of.
I mean,
So other people around you won't realize that the dog has come, say, because you've blown the whistle that they can't hear. Is there any way of attracting?
Well, we do, now that you mention it, we do have a series of nonverbal gestures that signal either your pleasure or your displeasure with the dog. and this is very useful, especially out in public. So, for example, you're walking the dog, and you have to go home and pee. You just do this. Or the dog is doing something that you know, he knows, you know, he knows he shouldn't do. You do this. I think we maybe call this, there's a name for this, like the gesture of exasperated martyrdom. You just do this. And the dog sooner or later learns these gestures, and it's just between you and it.
You and the dog. Now, there seems to be two schools of thought, and that this has become quite contentious. You take the dog for a walk. You have your little bag with you. Do you suppress your own fe when you bend over, or do you congratulate the dog?
Unfortunately, yes, you have to. You say,
I've never seen one this big.
This is the greatest dog.
My God, what a genius you.
And remember,
you sure nobody told you how to do this?
And remember, who's a good boy is itself a rhetorical question.
Yes. But again, some people seem to feel that, shaming the dog.
Well, some people, of course, that's half our technique. You have to shame the dog. You have to love the dog, then shame it, then unshame it. We don't call it shaming, actually, we call it guilting. You guilt the dog so that you can forgive it and be reunited with it blissfully so that you can offer it unconditional love until the next time when you're ready to guilt it again. And the cycle, the big wheel keeps on turning, as I like to say. We have basic commands that there are 5 modes. We have 3 basic commands, sit, down, and come, but there are 5 modes of increasing distress. There's casual, emphatic, urgent, petulant, and hysterical. So, for example, the command of sit, the casual way is, so you're going somewhere? The emphatic is, no, you're going to stand there all day? Actually, no, you're going to stand there all day? The urgent command, the urgent mode of this command is what? Would it kill you to sit down for 1 lousy second? The petulant is, all right, fine, don't sit, stand. Then the owner sits. And the hysterical version of this is, if you don't sit right this second, I swear to God, I'm never going to speak to you again, okay? It's usually useful to end everything with okay, so that the dog thinks you really care and you're sort of seeking its approval, even though you're yelling at it. For down, it's if the dog is jumping up and down uncontrollably. The casual way to remonstrate with the dog is to say, so what's with the jumping? The emphatic way is, were you told it was all right to jump all over everybody? The urgent version is, are you going to get down or am I talking to the wall? The petulant way is, go ahead, jump all you want, you always do. And of course, the hysterical way is, if you don't get down right this second, I swear to God, I'm never going to speak to you again. Okay? Eventually, the dog learns. And if it doesn't learn, it's a dog. What are you going to do? I remember hearing somebody, I don't remember where I heard this, speaking of some woman in previous generations when asked, or maybe the child said, can we get a dog? And her response was, animals in the house? Feh. We frown on that. We think that's an unenlightened point of view. Maybe from the old country, were there animals in the house anyway, but not dogs.
No, they weren't the dogs. Yeah, it was more the people living there. But again, what you're saying with the okay, can you actually teach them tricks using the okay?
Oh, that's a good question.
Like
depends on what you mean.
Walk on 2 legs, do my taxes, whatever.
Yeah, right. Or something in between.
Yeah.
Well, you can, but I think it has to be coupled with treats, right? With dog biscuits or whatever, or table scraps, or its own, steak. But always with the reminder that you're doing this of your own free will. You're giving it to the dog. It's not that the dog necessarily deserves it, but maybe it can live up to the trust you're showing in it. And of course it will, but first it wants to eat the steak.
Yeah, of course. Now, you're talking about treats and dog treats as distinct from things like steak. How does this differ from raising an actual child? Where generally if you came home and you were full and you didn't want to eat, your mother knew instantly it was because you had been filling up on
With
what
junk.
we called chazarai.
Right, right.
It's like you're out there, you're eating that crap all day, and now you come home and you don't get the good food.
Right.
Is there such a thing? I mean, dogs seem to, you seem to be quite big on the dog treats.
Dog treats.
Are you in the pay of a doggy dentist?
I mean, that's the rumor, but no.
Yeah.
Dog treats work, but your children, as in your example, get full. And in fact, my favorite Gary Larson cartoon is of a family, a mother, father, and a child of jellyfish, and they're floating at the table, and the mother is saying to this child, "Jeffrey, I thought we agreed no snacks before dinner." And what you can see inside Jeffrey's transparent body is a perfect slice of cheesecake. Dogs, and I was shocked, this is really true, and I was shocked to learn this. There are some dogs who will literally eat themselves to death. There are dogs who, especially smart ones, supposedly smart, like standard poodles. I know of one standard poodle who learned how to open a bin with a circular top and eat until it was just bloated and fell on the floor. You'd think nature, in her wisdom, would have taught dogs when to stop, but some of them will eat themselves to death, unlike children who will eat things and drive you to death.
Okay, well, thank you for clearing that up. I'd been wondering about that. Because, again, the whole thing with dogs get to eat whatever they want. This drove me.
Well, no, they get to eat whatever is not nailed down.
Yeah.
They may, although sometimes they do get to, here's a dog story. One of the beagle in this book is named Copper. Where is he? This is Copper with the goggles on. And Barbara and I and our dogs lived in this little compound, and one day we set up a picnic outside for everybody. So we had food on the table. It was Sunday. Copper, speaking of counter surfing, ate 2 pounds of lox, threw up, and ate it again. That's the last time we let the lox unguarded.
So much for teaching dogs fair.
Right.
Doesn't seem to be
Talk
working.
about filling up with junk.
Now, all the pictures and the dogs in the book are dogs that you actually have owned.
Or our
yes?
friends do. Yeah.
They're all dogs that you knew, though. These are not.
Yeah.
These aren't like prop dogs.
They're not professionals.
They're
no.
not.
Yeah.
No. Which was which was the one that I guess meant the most to you?
Well,
which of the
one
dogs
I'll tell you.
in
No, I'll tell you. The one that meant the most to Barbara and therefore to me was Jackson. Oh, and this is one of my favorite pictures. I mean, you can see it when you look at the book. It's me demanding to know what he's done because he's knocked over a bag of groceries from the store. He was our movie star dog. He was like 110 pounds, enormous Ridgeback. So he was, and completely stoic. You never knew when he was happy. You never knew when he was sad. But he was a giant among dogs. And then there are other. Here he is. It is true that different breeds have different personalities. I have a dog. I live in North Hollywood in Los Angeles, and I have a dog that's much like the little one here, much like this one. This is Peaches, who's no longer with us, but my dog Jeff is like this. And I walk him around the neighborhood, and first of all, it seems like everyone in their houses with their gates has a dog. And every dog we walk by runs to the fence and barks at Jeff. And I have no idea why. And speaking of two legs, there's one white, beautiful little white dog, I don't know the breed, stands on two legs and walks to the fence to bark at Jeff. And Jeff just keeps plowing on. I think, though, that the difference of personalities is not an impediment to being raised Jewish. There are phlegmatic dogs and there are excitable dogs, but I think they can all, when instructed in the proper contradictory and schizophrenogenic way, can be raised Jewish.
Yeah, I in fact know of a case, and this is actually true. I'm not even making this up. Since we're in Toronto, there used to be a gas station at the corner of Spadina and Eglinton. It was an Esso station there. The man who owned the gas station, who I happen to remember, his name was Roy Rubinoff. Roy had a dog. The dog's name was Shep. Shep used to do the banking. Roy used to, I'm not making this up, the dog spoke nothing but Yiddish. And he would send the dog to the bank with an envelope in its mouth. I'm really not making this up because it was reported on in the CJN, so you know it's true. It was in the Canadian Jewish News. Shep got an article, They wouldn't take an ad from the Esso, but the dog actually, it went to the bank.
Made the deposit.
It made the deposits. The problem was, and this is also true, I know this because, as I said, I had a connection with the Rubinoff family. After people read about the dog, they would see the dog on Eglinton. Before that, it had just been a dog with a thing in its mouth. Now, they're all yelling things at the dog, except in Yiddish. The problem is most people don't speak a lot of Yiddish anymore. All they know is bad words. So they're standing there and they're telling the dog to drop dead. They're telling the dog gay cockin', which the dog then proceeds to do,
that they can do, right?
So yeah, it can be done. I think Shep actually ended up owning the gas station, but this is the other thing. When do they take over? Is there any danger that there will be like a doggy singularity?
And they'll take over?
They will take over, and...
Well, they'll take over, they'll eat themselves to death, and we'll start over, if that's any comfort.
It sounds like the end of the Seder on Passover.
Exactly.
Right. Eventually, we just go full circle, and we're back to the same dog. I guess that could happen.
I'd like to share some examples of advanced commands. Once you've learned how to make the dog sit and stay and come, by then, of course, by definition, you have this symbiotic relationship with the dog, and there's almost no difference between you and it. So you can give it the following commands, for example, and they will be obeyed. Don't stare at Cousin Edith's hair when she comes over. What do I want to eat? And this is a classic because actual human beings have said this to other human beings, like my wife's mother would say this to her. I'm cold, put on a sweater. You don't have to call him doctor, it's just a PhD in media studies. I don't know how she lives with him. Tell me, how does she live with him? Israel, please, don't start. If you want this painting after I'm gone, speak up, because I'm not giving it to you-know-who. We're going to Mary Ellen's for dinner. Don't forget to eat first. Milan is overrated. Don't bother. If she starts talking about her son, I'm going to have to kill myself, and you're going to have to find your own way home. Those were all written by Barbara. We have had completely complementary, if not opposite, senses of humor. Our editor was a little brown named Terry Adams, and by coincidence, we got to him through Yiddish with Dick and Jane, but he edited the Monks of Newskeet book That was a complete coincidence. But he once referred to the way, our practice of the way we wrote our books, by that she exerted her civilizing influence on me. And what he meant by that was we would conceive of these books together, we would come up with an outline of what the general book would be about, but she mainly wrote scripts. She wrote TV scripts and movie scripts. I was mainly a prose writer, so I would write the first draft. And I'd print it out, and she'd sit in bed with a Sharpie and go, no, yeah, okay, but all right. And it turned out that she was right, because if left to my own devices, I realized I was much too abstract and much too brainy and not quite, and just too much for a general interest book. So I like reading these things of her because she came up with things that I never would have. We have a very long form to fill out for a dog sitter. If you would like to be a dog sitter, at a Jewish dog owning house, it goes on for something like 20 pages. And it has, it's your medical history. Are you allergic to dogs? If yes, why do you want to dog sit? Have you ever been convicted of a crime apart from minor traffic offenses? Which ones? Have you ever been in therapy? If yes, for what? What's the name of your therapist? What's the hourly rate of your treatment? Will you waive doctor-patient confidentiality and allow me to review your therapist's evaluation? And one of the things was, are you married? Yes or no? And the next item was, big wedding? I never would have thought of that. That was her. We do have some advice for when you and the dog get older. And we came up with a system for reminding the older dog what it's looking at. And that is to take a picture of the thing and put that picture on the thing. So we have a picture of a dog looking at a photo, standing at a window, a picture of the window attached to the window so the dog knows that it's looking at a window. And we've never had any complaints about that.
Really? So you're raising dogs that are going to be Magritte fans?
They're Jewish.
Yeah, exactly.
No.
So they'll look at the famous picture that says, right, this is not a pipe, ce n'est pas un pipe, and they will know maybe they started it. Because this was the origins. This is, I think, before we move to the question period, one of my last questions for you.
Yeah.
You had already done, you'd written, you and Barbara, Yiddish with Dick and Jane,
right,
prior to How to Raise a Jewish Dog.
Yeah.
Did that influence your choice?
Yes, because Dick and Jane did so well, we thought, let's do another Jewish book.
Yeah.
And
famous, yes. So many people have miscalculated.
How right we were. And because it combined our three favorite things, especially her three favorite things, humor, Jewishness, and dogs.
Right.
And this is where I reveal that I'm allergic to dogs. And the dogs in this book, we lived, when we wrote this, in this compound where copper ate the locks. There were 3 little buildings. We lived in one, and Barbara had 2 dogs. I came from Pennsylvania with a fox terrier. A couple lived behind us who owned copper, and a single guy lived at the third house with the dog. So there were 5 dogs in this compound. Every day, everybody would go to work except me, and all the dogs would come to my house. So I was allergic to dogs and was surrounded by 5 dogs. But the good news was, someone said you can get shots and for the allergy, and they were right, and it worked. And years later, I asked my allergist, are you still giving the shots? And he said, no, they're not making the serum anymore, which I was sad to hear. Before we stopped, I wanted to give a plug for the photographer of this book. It's a friend of ours named Susan Bernstein, who did these wonderful photos, as you'll see. But if you go to her website, Susan, Burnstine, SusanBernstein.com, she's a fantastic artistic photographer, and her images look like nothing you've ever seen because she hand builds her cameras out of junk out of toys and plastic bags and pieces of plastic. Excuse me. So her images are like black and white photos out of dreams. But she did a great job with this. And then when we were writing this book, I was reminded when I read it this morning that it was during writing of this that I came up with our next idea, which was a series of affirmations to cure your dog's depression called affirmations. And they're a series of affirming pieces of wisdom and uplift that you can read to your dog. And she took a lot of pictures, of fantastic pictures of dogs. And then we did catechisms, fundamentals of feline faith. And it's in a catechistic question and answer version of format about what cats believe. And Susan took pictures of them. And they weren't as well published because it was a different publisher. But I wanted to get Susan's name out there. Do we do questions?
I think we should, Atara, should we? Yeah. Does anybody have questions? Are there?
Oh, come on. Yes, you
come
do.
on.
Everybody's shy.
No, really no need to be
Anybody
shy
have any
about
answers?
it. Yeah, or we will just start giving answers, and
Okay.
you'll have to guess the question.
Right. It's like Jeopardy. How many people here have a dog? Literally everybody. Good. Okay.
Just about all of them.
That makes sense.
Yes, but how many of the dogs are being raised in this manner? How
Well,
many?
not-
We've got a couple of brave souls out there.
Good for you. How dare you?
Yeah. Yeah, but you've brought a picture of the dog with his yarmulke on. Is he wearing tefillin or not? So after the bar mitzvah, come back, and or the bark mitzvah, I guess.
I like this cover, but it occurred to me that I would rather, and I doubt that they could have had the photograph. Maybe they could with Photoshop today. This book came out in 2007. I would rather the bagel have been thrown like a frisbee and have the dog leaping in the air and catching it. Maybe next time.
Yes, but when the dog's leaping in the air, they have to have the picture of you having the heart attack on the
yes.
sidelines.
Right.
He's going to kill himself. I can't look.
Right.
Yes.
Is it a conscious decision to raise a dog Jewish, or does it happen by osmosis?
That, surprisingly enough, is a good question. It has to be a conscious decision because, and you have to have and get this book because some of it is intuitively obvious, but a lot of it is not. Although you should say to me, the way I was raised, I'd have nothing to learn from you. I'll do what my mother and father did to me, and it'll work out. So only you know that. Yeah. Others, all the way in the back.
Here.
Oh.
Is it only Jewish dogs that sleep in their owners' beds?
Can you repeat the question? So that
The question is it only Jewish dogs that sleep in their owners' beds? No. Is it only Jewish dogs who are allowed on the good sofa? The question is there a bad sofa? Because if there are two sofas, then the answer may be yes. But there's always a bed. In here, we advise how to buy a dog bed, which is essentially, a big pillow. But remember that when the dog jumps on your bed and you give it all the appropriate commands and it fails to heed the commands, you then say, okay, fine, I'll sleep on your bed. And there's a picture of Barbara doing that. So we advise when you get the dog bed, make sure it's comfortable to you.
Yeah, there was, and this can actually be done. There was a rabbi in the city at one time. I won't name. This is a real person. This is not actually anything bad about him. He had a dog, which was very unusual. The idea that a rabbi, and this was an Orthodox rabbi, trained yet in Europe, would have a dog, this is amazing enough. But he had a dog. The dog was famous. It would only eat if its bowl had a copy of the Forwards underneath it. There had to be a Yiddish paper there, or the dog would not touch the food, because it had only, from the time that he got the dog, and this is Rabbi Farrell, for those of you who know these things, he told me about this. He didn't do it intentionally. That was the paper he had at home.
The edition in Hebrew.
So he would have the Yiddish paper, he'd put the dog's bowl on the paper so the floor wouldn't get dirty. That was the only paper he had in the house. The dog got used to seeing only Yiddish paper, or, papers with the Hebrew alphabet. If he would buy...
The New York Review of Books, it didn't work.
No, although I eat my food off the New York Review
so
of
do I,
Books,
but
generally.
we're not dogs.
No, but it wouldn't, you brought the Globe or the Star, the dog would turn its nose up and actually not eat.
That's amazing.
And this really did happen.
This is not only a Jewish dog, this is an Orthodox dog.
That's the Jewish, that's the rabbi dog,
Right.
that's the Rov. So, yes.
Can you tell by a dog's behavior if it was raised Jewish or not?
Well, that's a good question. I would say yes, because you'll see the dog both following its own impulses and then stopping and looking at the owner and coming back, and then following its own and then stopping and looking at the owner. So again, it's the act of contradictions in action. And what you ask about, does this include what you could also ask, can you tell this by watching the owner? And the answer is yes, for the same reason. The owner will first kvel and talk to everybody and say, look at this wonderful, and then when the dog misbehaves, in front of everyone saying, how could you do this to me? The point being, how could you do that? It's important that everyone see that you're doing this to me. Right. Huh. And that I didn't think of that before. That's good.
No, it's not bad, but
yeah.
What about, when the dog is doing exactly that, and you are thinking exactly that, but do you turn to the other people there and begin talking about the dog as if it's not present?
Actually, that's a good idea. Yes, we do have a picture of that. We do have a picture of we advise you to go up to strangers, but this is with the dog, and say, isn't he the best? Isn't this a wonderful...
I was thinking more of the anger, like you go up to a stranger.
And say, can you believe that?
Can you look what it's doing to me?
Yeah.
You ever heard of such a thing? You offer it kibble, and no, it's too good for kibble.
Right.
This is Mr. Too Good for Kibble. I'd like to introduce. Do you do this? And does it work? Or
does it work? Define work. What it does accomplish is it alienates the person you're talking to.
Good.
It maybe embarrasses the dog. I think probably it's 50-50. Sometimes it works because we're all talking about contradiction, and sometimes it doesn't. You take a gamble.
Potential double, but no grand slam.
And if it didn't work, you go to the next stranger and see if it works.
Of course, yeah. You have to keep asking until you get the answer.
Do you believe he did this to me? Right.
Yeah. You call this a dog? That's a dog.
Well, that's, yeah. When I told Michael this, when I was walking my fox terrier through Bethlehem, Pennsylvania once, I came to a stoplight, and a woman was there with a dog that was this big. And we're waiting for the light to change, and I said to her, "And you call this a dog?" And she was ready for it. She said, "Yes, it comes with batteries." That was a nice dog owner moment.
It comes with batteries. Yeah. Are there any other questions?
There must be. You people, when I run home and get to work on your animals, you can't know. Oh, I know why you're not asking questions, because you're all going to buy the book and you know it's all in here. I forgive you. Yes.
If a dog is raised either non-denominational or some other type of religion, can it convert?
That's a very good question.
It can be converted.
Right.
It won't do it on its own. But if you work hard enough, I mean, I do know of cases where there are now like reform dogs who talk about dogitude a lot and doggyism, but they don't go for, some of the stuff, dogs just don't do it anymore. They don't need it. That was for primitive dogs. So I've seen that happen. I've seen the occasional reform dog go ortho. But that's the last thing you want is a dog a Baal Tshuva. Passover, Pesach time comes, you cannot win. And you imagine, what 8 days of matzah does to you. Imagine having to pry it out of the dog. You really, the Orthodox dog, that's something that only non-Jews should own. I would only wish an Orthodox dog on an anti-Semite, because they're going to drive you completely mad.
From your mouth to God's ear.
Mine, yeah.
Yes.
So, I think that some dogs inherently know they're Jewish before there's any training. Because,
Oh, that's interesting.
When I was growing up, our dog fasted on Yom Kippur every year. we never told her, but every year she fasted.
Did you put food out?
Yeah, the food.
You put the food out.
But she said, "You're not eating on that."
Wow.
Could you send her to shul instead?
Well, no. The question is, didn't you rush her to the vet?
The question is, do dogs inherently know they're Jewish before the training starts?
I don't think so.
No, they.
I think Spinoza dealt with that issue.
Well, there's Maimonides on distemper, and it's one of the minor volumes. But Maimonides, the Rambam says that a dog won't necessarily, they're going to imitate your behavior. They won't know why for a while. But this is there's a category for this. It's called, you do things with the dog for the sake of educating them. So it's the same way, like, kids will start to fast gradually. Starting by the time
slowly,
they're 11 or 12, they'll fast half the day on Yom Kippur or something. They'll work themselves into it. It's the same kind of thing with the dog. Then the dog realizes, oh, I'm Jewish. No wonder I'm not eating on Yom Kippur. It's this is the Jackie Mason influence on the dogs. Oh, that's why I'm doing this. So, they're not always aware, but they'll absorb it anyway. And there was one, yes?
Did you go with your dog to therapy to deal with all these issues?
I have been. It's
Well,
the dog doesn't let me get a word in is the problem.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's family therapy. Because the dog is a member of the family, for better and for worse. Yeah. Then we get into, as the previous question is, does the dog know it's in therapy? The mystery of consciousness is so absorbing. And what it is and what it isn't and what it wants from us, we don't know. Others? Oh, you know everything now.
Yeah.
You guys have mics already. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very, very fun. What a treat to have you both. Ellis, I know that you came here, I spoke to you last week, and you said, how's the weather? And I said, it's like 20 degrees. I've never had such a beautiful fall in my whole life. I'm really sorry.
And I said, that's for me.
I'm really sorry. But I'm immensely grateful to you.
Oh, no, I'm happy to be reminded just a little of the weather I used to live in the East Coast. I live in LA now, and we don't have this anymore. I don't have it anymore. But enough's enough.
He's going home tomorrow. And Michael, thank you so much for all of the work that you put in to make this evening so enjoyable. Thank you to you both. It was really fun. We had amazing sponsors. I know that we talked about them before, but so happy to have had them aboard. Obviously, Congregation Habonim, Living Jewishly, Camp Canine, and United Bakers. I really want to thank them for their support, and I really want to thank all of you. You have been tremendous friends coming out on this very cold night, but also because you continue to help us with our mission to provide independence to Israelis who would otherwise struggle in their day-to-day lives. It means so much that you came out, that you continue to support us, and I hope that we've captured your heart just a little bit more, and that you'll continue to stick with us. So thank you. Good night.
I would like to say that if you want to buy one of Ellis's books, I'm sure he'd be happy to sign it for you.
They're outside.
The same goes for Michael's, which is a great book, A Born to Fetch.